What if I told you there was a single idea that could potentially wipe out poverty for millions, but at the same time, it could risk the entire nation's economy? Well, that is the huge promise and the very real peril of universal basic income in India. Today, we're going to break down this whole debate.
All right, before we get into the weeds, let's kick things off with a little test. Here's a question that could pop up on an exam like the UPSC. Have a look, think it over, and hey, drop your answer in the comments below. Let's see if your answer stays the same by the time we're done here.
So let's get right to it. What exactly is universal basic income, or UBI? You know, in a world where things like automation are changing the job market faster than ever, and our old safety nets just don't feel as secure, UBI has become this really powerful, if radical, idea for how we can give everyone a bit of economic security. At its core, the idea is actually pretty simple. It's a regular payment. It's given in cash, and it goes to every single person, no matter who you are, with absolutely no strings attached. The goal? Well, it's just to create a basic financial floor that nobody can fall below. So any true UBI really stands on these three pillars. It has to be universal. That means for everyone. It's a direct cash transfer, so we're not talking about food stamps or other benefits. And crucially, it's completely unconditional. You don't have to work for it or prove you need it. Now, this definition is key. If a program isn't all three of these things, it's some other kind of welfare, but it's not UBI. Keep that in mind for that question we started with. And, this idea might sound new and radical, but it actually connects right back to the core principles of India's constitution. Things like the right to live with dignity or securing a livelihood for all citizens. In a way, the philosophical groundwork for something like UBI has been part of the national conversation for a very long time. Okay, so with that foundation in place, let's build the case for UBI. Why is this idea getting so much attention? Well, because its supporters see it as way more than just a handout. They see it as a powerful engine for both personal empowerment and national security. The argument really kicks off with this number, 22%. That's the share of India's population living below the poverty line. UBI would be a direct shot of cash into the hands of this group, creating an immediate safety net that could lift millions and protect them from sudden economic shocks. But the argument goes way beyond that. Proponents say it could replace India's complicated maze of welfare schemes, which are often leaky and inefficient. It would give people the freedom to make their own choices, push more people to use bank accounts, and spark local economies from the bottom up by increasing spending. And this is where the conversation gets really forward-looking. Think about automation, AI, all the technologies that could disrupt millions of jobs. UBI is seen as a crucial cushion for that future. It gives people a layer of security so they have the breathing room to adapt, to learn new skills, or even take a risk and start a small business. But, of course, it's not that simple. Not even close. For every powerful argument in favor of UBI, there's a really significant hurdle. So now, let's flip the coin and look at the case against it, because it's just as compelling. The single biggest argument against UBI can pretty much be boiled down to one number, 5%. A very minimal basic income is estimated to cost nearly 5% of India's entire GDP. That is a massive, monumental figure, and it's the first question any UBI proposal has to answer. Where does the money come from? And beyond the staggering price tag, there are other huge concerns. Critics worry that free money could make people less motivated to work. Pumping that much cash into the economy could also trigger serious inflation, basically eating away at the value of the payment. And then you have the practical problems. How do you pick one amount that works for both expensive cities and cheaper rural areas? And how do you physically get the money to every single person? It's a logistical nightmare. So this really brings us to the heart of the debate, the central tension. On one side of the scale, you have this incredible promise, a chance to dramatically reduce poverty and give everyone more economic freedom. But on the other side, you have the immense risk of a financial burden the country just can't handle. Given this huge tension, the conversation naturally starts to shift. Okay, if a full-blown nationwide UBI is just too big and too risky, what are the alternatives? Is there some kind of middle ground that could give us some of the benefits without all the costs? So this brings us to a few different models. We could just stick with what we're already doing, like targeted welfare for specific groups. Think of the PM Kisan scheme for farmers. Or we could double down on employment guarantees, like MGNREGA, which gives people work instead of just cash. And then there's a totally different idea, universal basic services. The idea here is forget cash, and just focus on making things like healthcare and education free and excellent for everyone. So, where do we go from here? Well, it turns out India's economic survey from a few years back really wrestled with this exact question. And instead of an all or nothing answer, it actually suggested a much more practical, step-by-step path forward. The survey came up with some pretty clever ways to dip our toes in the water. Instead of pure universal, what about a quasi-universal plan that targets, say, the bottom 75%? Or what if we start by giving a basic income only to women? That could dramatically improve household well-being and cut the cost in half. Or maybe the most practical idea of all, just start small and pilot the scheme with the most vulnerable groups first to see what happens. But, and this is a big but, here's the reality check. Even that scaled-down quasi-universal idea, well, it comes with a very familiar price tag, just under 5% of GDP. It just goes to show you, no matter how you slice it, that huge financial challenge is always there, and it's the main obstacle to any large-scale basic income plan. All of which leads us to a much more balanced conclusion. Maybe the future of UBI in India isn't about throwing out everything we have now and starting from scratch. Instead, it might be about seeing UBI as just one powerful tool in a much bigger toolkit, something that could work alongside and complement the programs we already have. And so we end right back where we started, with that really big question. Now that you've heard the arguments on both sides, what do you think? Is universal basic income this revolutionary solution that's just waiting to happen? Or is it a beautiful idea that's just a fiscally impossible dream? There's definitely no easy answer, but it's for sure a debate that's going to shape India's future. I'd love to know what you think. Thanks for joining me.